If you are sitting next to an empty seat, raise your hand so that we could get some of our alums and parents seated next to you. Be a good NYU citizen and just raise your hand if you've got a seat next to you that's open. We've got one over here, 3 over here. Friends, family, come on in. We've got one right here. Just keep your hands up. People will be able to see you. Jeffrey, do we still have the 3, or it's filled? 1. Does anyone want to sit down? We've got one seat right here. And I know you all did not come to hear me speak, so the faster that we can get seated, the faster that I will be off this stage. All right. Well, good morning. Welcome to all of you. I am so very excited to be up in front of you this morning, introducing a very special man and really opening up a very special day. My name's Heather Canaday. I am currently serving you all as president of the New York University Alumni Association. Thank you, thank you. Today is quite a celebration of NYU's best. I hope you're enjoying your time on campus and taking part in the wide array of programs and events available to both you alumni and our parents. Really quickly, can I just have our Alumni Day committee members stand up so we can give them a warm round of applause? On behalf of the Alumni Day Committee and on behalf of the New York University Alumni Association, I'm especially glad that you could join us today for this very special event. President Andrew Hamilton's first ever State of the University address. It is my great pleasure to introduce you today, President Hamilton, and I'm sure many of you, probably all of you, are quite familiar with some of Andy's great accomplishments. I'm going to detail a couple of them here, though. Andy and his lovely wife, Jenny, have joined us in NYU at January 2016. They joined us from Oxford University, you may have heard of it, where Andy served as Vice Chancellor, the institution's senior-most officer. Their great charisma has energized our alumni and parents and the entire university community. In each place that they visited around our satellite and Washington Square campus, Andy and Jenny have spent a great deal of time, in his words, listening and learning, and talking with people from every quarter of NYU about their questions, concerns, and aspirations. One thing I'm sure Andy will talk about today is his commitment to affordability and diversity on our campus, and I personally will give you a great round of applause for pursuing those 2 important initiatives. Thank you. And while listening and learning, Andy has taken what he's learned and established a few key priorities here for NYU, which he'll discuss today. A leader of such caliber with such an extraordinary skill set is a huge asset to our university. We're delighted to have Andy here and would like to congratulate him on his official inauguration as the 16th president of NYU, which took place just a few weeks ago in September. Please join me now in welcoming President Andrew Hamilton.
Heather, thank you very much indeed for that warm introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, what has been an incredibly warm welcome for Jenny and me since we arrived in New York City in January. And let me, as Heather so forcefully pointed out, my very first address on the NYU Alumni Day, let me express my welcome to all of you, alumni and parents. I couldn't be more thrilled to see such a crowd, to see such a packed room, standing room only, and I wish you welcome. I just have to begin by apologizing to you that I've managed to bring British weather with me, and it can't be helped. I'll try hard not to do so next year. But I know that there are many advantages of having British weather, of rain and grey and dreary. It's that there's nothing to distract you from the fabulous things going on inside, from the programs, from the lectures, from the faculty, from the many, many activities that you have in different parts of this great university. And I hope you are all having a wonderful day, connecting, alumni, reliving that lost youth. And you parents, I hope, especially the freshman parents, that you have found your children alive and contented, happy, and enjoying NYU, enjoying all it offers, but especially enjoying the intellectual stimulation, the intellectual vibrancy that you can very much feel in this place. And so it's a pleasure to welcome you. As I said, Jenny and I have been welcomed just so often and so wonderfully in New York. It is quite remarkable, the depth of New York's welcome to us. They named a musical after me, and nothing can be more significant in embracing than that. Let me also join Heather in thanking the incredible volunteers, the members of the NYU Alumni Board, the Alumni Day Committee, and all of you who give of your time and give of your energy to this great university. We who work here, we who teach here, we appreciate enormously the role that you play. I've said it 1,000 times since I arrived here in January, and I will continue to say it. A university is defined by its alumni. You go out into the world and you represent us, both in the words that you say about your time at NYU, but also in the lives that you live and the examples that you provide in your lives and in your careers. And so we are enormously grateful to all of our alumni. We have very special alumni at this university. There are nearly 500,000 of you, 470,000 NYU alumni. We can't wait to get that 500,000th alumni as they graduate from Yankee Stadium, probably sometime next year. We should hit the 500,000 next year. And it really is an incredibly special group all over the world, living in more than 180 countries and doing just a staggering variety of things in their lives. But that variety is exemplified in the talent and in the recognition that NYU alumni get. Just in the last couple of months, we've had NYU alumni receiving the National Medal of the Arts from President Obama. We've had NYU alumni winning 13 Emmy Awards and 5 Tony Awards. And we've even had an NYU alumnus winning a MacArthur Genius Award. And just, I could list so many others. That's just in the last few weeks. So I knew before I arrived at NYU what a very, very special place this is. I arrive here from a career, as Heather mentioned, that certainly in the last couple of decades that's been spent mainly at 2 universities, Yale, where I was a professor of chemistry and then got involved in administration, eventually becoming the provost of Yale, the second in command there. And then I went to Oxford, as Heather said, and spent a number of years as the Vice-Chancellor, which is the equivalent of President. And, you know, whether I was sitting up on 95, Interstate 95, or whether I was sitting across the Atlantic, I kept my eye on NYU. I kept my eye as someone who was in the world of higher education in those two very fine, distinguished institutions, Yale and Oxford. I kept my eye on NYU because what I saw in this university was a remarkable place, a remarkable trajectory that I think all of you, as I look around the room, I see recent alumni, and I see some alumni from a fair time back, and we've had a wonderful celebration of the 50th anniversary for a number of our alumni and beyond. And you have seen a transformation of NYU. You've seen a university really on a quite remarkable trajectory. And it's that trajectory I want to talk about just a little bit this morning, and my observations in these first few months, as Heather said, of listening, of getting to know NYU. But you also heard from Heather that I had the great privilege of being inaugurated as the 16th president of NYU just about 4 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And it was a huge honor. We had a week of celebration of NYU, of faculty activities, student activities, staff involvement. One evening, Jenny and I ate 7 dinners. We went to 7. We couldn't do 12 in the halls of residence. We went to 7 and ate with the students 7 times. I can assure you, I wanted just to say that to give you a sense of the sacrifice that Jenny and I make for NYU. In my case, it's sacrificing my waistline, but it was wonderful, an opportunity to really to meet with all of the students. Now, some of you may be asking, you know, if I arrived in January, why was my inauguration held in September? And of course, my colleagues in the administration at NYU, when we first began to talk about an inauguration, said, Andy, you know, January and February in New York City is not a great time to hold an inauguration. The weather, you can never, snowstorms, nor'easters, all of that kind of stuff. And any of you who were here will remember we did actually have 3 feet of snow in New York City in early February. But it was only when I got to late September and a few days before the inauguration that I really realized why it had been delayed for 9 months. It was because I was on probation. And the fact that we had the inauguration clearly meant I passed probation. And it now allows me, without hindrance, without the waiting for that special inauguration event, really to throw myself into, to get deeply involved in this great university. And all of you know it in many ways far better than I do. I'm really a new arrival at NYU, and you alumni and parents, as you've been considering the place that your child should study, you've got to know this university and what it does and what it represents. It was founded in 1831, and it was founded with a very, very auspicious commitment to creating a university that at that time served the city of New York, but very much was a university that was open to a far wider group in society than the universities at Harvard and Yale and what then was King's College, now Columbia, that educated the elite. NYU was committed to openness. It was committed to making its riches, its opportunities available to all. And it was, in a sense, it was that bold spirit that similarly drew me here, because as I look at NYU and I see that trajectory it's been on over the past 3, 4, 5 decades, what I see as a university, I recognize a university that in a sense has traits. We don't have the longest history. Oxford's nearly 900 years old. Yale's 350 years old nearly. We don't have the longest history of universities. We certainly don't have the largest endowment of universities. But what I can tell you is we have something more than any other university I know or I am aware of. We have a boldness of ambition. We have a spirit that relishes experiment, exploration, developing new programs, being bold, not being risk averse. I love Oxford, I love Yale, but I can assure you the one thing that both of them are is risk averse. NYU, through this spirit that is infused in New York City, truly can take bold steps as it develops education, has taken bold steps over these last many, many decades. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. I think, for me, I see the openness of the university, and we'll come and talk about that in a few moments a little deeper. But I look at the openness. Let me give you a statistic. Many of you will be aware that there is a federal grants program that assists students from the lowest socio-economic sector of American society. It's called Pell Grants. It's a federal program. I'm proud to say that NYU, its undergraduate programs, we have 22% of our undergraduates who are Pell Grant recipients. And that number is one of the highest in all leading universities in America. I would point out that a university like Yale is probably around 15%. A university like Columbia is about similar number, 15%. Many of you might know Washington University in St. Louis, a fine university. That's about 6% Pell Grants. NYU, through this openness that's such a tradition in our makeup, has 22% of its students, its undergraduate students, who are Pell Grant recipients. Well, thank you. And let me say one other fact, that because of the size of NYU, and we'll discuss that in a second, because of the size, we have 25,000 undergraduates. That means 22% of 25,000, we have 5,400 Pell Grant students studying at NYU today. That is more Pell Grant students than Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, and Duke combined. This is a university that truly is committed to affecting the life chances, to enhancing the opportunities of students, and especially students from disadvantaged backgrounds. I find that very powerful and very important as we set the stage and we set the priorities for NYU in the coming years. And as I begin my presidency, let me just touch briefly. I don't want to give you a repeat performance of my inauguration speech because it went on and on and on. And I want to leave lots of time for questions. But let me just touch upon some of those key issues, because the boldness of NYU has led in a very compelling and a very profound way to academic excellence. And I, as I stand here as the 16th president of NYU, commit to ensuring that that trajectory of academic excellence, improvement in all of our academic fields, that will continue under my presidency. And I will work tirelessly to ensure that actually areas at NYU that have not gone forward and upward with academic strength as others have. We now have one of the top philosophy departments in the country. Our humanities are highly regarded. Social sciences, economics, sociology, among the finest in America. Law, business, medicine, the arts, these are all exceptionally strong parts of NYU. But there are some areas that still need to make continued investment and progress. One of them is the sciences, my area. I'm a chemist, an organic chemist. So we will be committing to ensuring that our sciences at NYU rise in the rankings, improve in their academic excellence, and let me include engineering in that. NYU has recently, in the last decade or so, brought engineering back into the fold by merging with the former Brooklyn Polytechnic. We now have an incredibly exciting activity going on there, the opportunity for collaboration with medicine, with science, with economics, with dentistry, great College of Dentistry that NYU has, is that possibility is great. And so there will be, in these coming years, a focus on engineering and raising its stock, raising its level in the world of academic excellence. So commitment to academic excellence, as almost all new presidents would do, but I can assure you that I, now responsible for this wonderful trajectory of NYU, it will continue, and I am very excited by that. And of course, as I talk about engineering, it brings my focus just a little bit to the east of here, to Brooklyn. And Brooklyn, now with the arrival of engineering, it offers us at NYU some incredibly exciting opportunities, and we are taking hold of those opportunities. What we are doing is we're using Brooklyn and the very lively, dynamic, vibrant environment that Brooklyn represents, the presence of the Tandon School of Engineering. We have a 500,000 square foot building that is undergoing full renovation. That will become a major focus at NYU for high technology, but not just computer science, wireless engineering, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, not just those incredibly exciting areas. What we will do at NYU, what we have been doing at NYU, is taking our engineering and, I was going to say crashing it together. That's too violent a metaphor. But bringing it together with our world-class performing arts. Tisch School of the Arts, Steinhardt School of Education and Culture. These are some of NYU's remarkable strengths. Combine that with computer scientists, combine it with virtual reality investigators. What do you have? You have the new world. You have games design, those games your kids play endlessly on their iPhones and their iPads. You have virtual reality, the telling of stories, which artists have done through drama, through words. That telling of stories now takes a 21st century form, and you will find that happening in Brooklyn, and you will find many consequences of that. I'm very excited by the incubators that are taking place now in Brooklyn. New companies, spin-out companies, generating that next generation of economic driver for the city of New York. And we are very pleased that NYU is already, but very much will be in the future, a key part of that. Heather mentioned briefly, and let me reinforce now. When I arrived here in January, I did visit every part of NYU in New York City and beyond. And the thing that I expected to hear from students, I somewhat surprisingly heard from everyone, staff and faculty as well. And that is the cost of attendance at NYU is too high. The burden that many of our families and students are having to bear is something that is inhibiting their ability to learn, their ability to launch themselves and embrace their time at NYU. So I have made in these first few months affordability a very high priority. It is a little disturbing that the only thing that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton agree on is that college costs too much, and it's a rather uncomfortable thing to be the only thing that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump agree on. And then they're not wrong. And we've got to get a control. We've got to stop the rate of increase of tuition and room and board. Actually, NYU's tuition isn't at the top of the tree. It isn't it's in the middle of the pack of our related universities. But of course, NYU is in one of the most expensive parts of one of the most expensive cities on earth, and so our room and board is high. This year, we've frozen the cost of room and board. We kept tuition increase to the lowest level it's been in 20 years. We've begun a root and branch look at how we can present to students and families opportunities to gain an NYU education with no lessening in quality, but opportunities perhaps to go through a little faster if that's something a student wants, to find opportunities for cheaper options in accommodation, in food service, cost of books. I convened a committee, we called it the Affordability Committee, to engage students, faculty and staff to really look, to bring forward new ideas. They've brought forward their first interim report, and we're beginning now to start rolling out and implementing those ideas that are coming forward. So this will be an ongoing commitment during my presidency to try and keep the cost of NYU's wonderful education down. Let me also mention another thing that Heather touched upon. The other discussion, the other issue that has very much occupied a great deal of my time in these first months is the issue of diversity and inclusion. And this is something that all of you will be aware in America is a very important national discussion. It's a long overdue national discussion taking place, and we at NYU have engaged our students, our staff, and our faculty similarly to look at our environment, to look at our culture, to look at the experiences our students have, and especially our students from marginalized groups. And we've done that, we've continued to do that, and it won't surprise you, we found some really quite troubling things. We found that we are wanting in a number of areas, in the way, the experiences that our students from minority and marginalized groups are having at NYU. And so it's really, I think, been a wonderful opportunity to engage in very difficult discussions, to talk about experiences in the classroom, to talk about language used by faculty, to talk about experiences that students have in the dorm, and to bring forward some proposals, some ideas for change. And I'm delighted we formed a large and a very lively diversity, inclusion and equity committee that has done exactly that. They've brought forward proposals for change, and already we've started to implement some of those proposals. We've begun the search for a new chief diversity officer who will report to me, raising the awareness and also the authority of an individual focused on these issues at NYU in the 21st century. We set up a bias response line so that students and staff can report anonymously incidences of discrimination and bias that they encounter in the classroom or in their dorms. We have focused a great deal of attention on a key part of NYU's outreach and connection to minority students, and that's through our Center for Multicultural Education and Programs, CMEP, and we've increased staffing, and we've also increased the programming there. We are beginning a widespread assessment of the culture at NYU, the culture in New York, but also beyond New York. And this will be, again, during these first months and years of my presidency, something that I will keep in everyone's eye and mind because it matters, and we need to make changes here. Let me finish with another aspect of NYU that presents to me one of its great developments of these last couple of decades, and that's the global program. Even in the last few minutes of chatting to a number of you as Jenny and I walked in, I've heard about experiences of your children in Florence, in London, at NYU sites around the world. And here's a perfect example of this boldness of ambition and spirit that NYU has in its DNA. For me, that's something that the global network, the campuses in Abu Dhabi and in Shanghai, the 11 other sites around the world, London, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, Florence, Prague, Tel Aviv, Buenos Aires, Accra, Sydney, a remarkable global network. And we even have a site in the most foreign of places, particularly during this presidential campaign, NYU Washington, D.C. And nothing can be more important that this opportunity for all of our students, and I mean all of our students, to not only continue their education, but to do so in the context of a different culture, a different language, a different experience. I will, in my years as president of NYU, commit to ensuring that the global network strengthens, it becomes greater than the sum of its parts, it becomes an even more significant part of the education and the research that our students undertake while they're at NYU. Let me finish. I've talked for too long. But I will say NYU is not a perfect university. We make mistakes. Inevitably, as a first mover in a world like global, we will make mistakes, but we learn from those mistakes. We may not be a perfect university, but I'm absolutely certain we are a profoundly important one. I know we're important for all of you alumni and parents, but I want to commit to all of you, this very new, this very green president, that I have found NYU in these first months to be a remarkable place, full of energy, full of enthusiasm, full of ideas, full of bold commitment to ensuring that the very best education and path-breaking research goes on at NYU. And I'm very proud, Jenny and I are thrilled to be part of it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We do have time for questions, and I stand here ready to tackle questions. There are microphones at different places. We have one right in the middle, a graduate of Stern. A question from you, sir.
Sure.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. So I was lucky enough to be presented before you at the Sheldonian a few years ago.
Wonderful.
So I had a chance to hear your successor speak, and she was welcomed at Pall Mall last week. She mentioned of the bureaucracy of Oxford, like 145 direct reports. And how do you feel the bureaucracy and the different regulatory challenges in NYU, how they differ from there, and how they might impact the affordability and diversity sort of campaigns you have?
This is an Oxford graduate as well, clearly. And what I should be doing is what is done in Oxford. I should have delivered my speech this morning in Latin. And then that would have been more appropriate. Let me, you ask a complex question, bureaucracy. It exists everywhere. Let's not forget, NYU is a very large university. We have 57,000 students. We have, even in New York, we are in Washington Square. We're in Brooklyn. The health complex is on First Avenue. The Institute for Fine Arts is near the Central Park. Even in New York, we have a scale and an impact on the city that inevitably brings with it a complexity of administration, and we must be responsive to that needs of a large and a complex organization. But I will say that in the recent years, we've also seen a very significant increase in demands from both state and federal governments for levels of administrative oversight that have required even more administration to be built, not just at NYU, but at all American universities. That's the same in the UK. It's not very different in truth. They come in different forms. But it is a consequence of the modern world. Any of you who read the newspapers know the issue of sexual harassment has led to a federal program known as Title IX that requires every university in America, NYU included, to actually build a whole infrastructure around the very important issue of responding to need and investigating cases of accusations of sexual harassment. But it's an example. I use it as an example of where we've actually had to increase our administration, and I could give you 50 other examples of where that's the case as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Leon Choate from the class of 1962.
Wonderful.
When I went to NYU back in those years, we had a reputation. It wasn't as good as it is today, especially the Stern School and the law school. I'm proud that I'm part of those institutions today. What steps do you plan to take to improve the overall rating of NYU in the top 50 universities in the country?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I hope it came across in my words. I'm absolutely committed to ensuring this spectacular trajectory that has taken place over the last 3-4 decades, that continue, and that standing continue. It will be important that we shore up the strength of Stern, the strength of the law school, as you give examples. The world of higher education is a very competitive one in the 21st century. We now have significant competition coming up in China, in places like Tsinghua University and Peking University. We have increasing competition from India, the IITs in engineering and science, not to mention European universities and Southeast Asian, Australian, Canadian. So this is a very competitive world that we live in, and the way we will ensure maintaining the strength of, for example, your two schools, the law and Stern, is by investing in faculty, investing in scholarship programs to make sure that the education is available to all. But as I said in my words a second ago, I do think it's also important that we look at those areas of NYU that haven't risen as much as we would have liked them. And I would count among those areas particularly science and engineering. I believe passionately that to make sure the university continues to rise overall, it matters for law that we have strong engineering. It matters for Stern that we have strong physics. And so by identifying those areas that have not risen as we would have hoped, and investing in them, recruiting outstanding faculty, that will be a key priority of mine, but with absolutely no lessening of focus on our already outstanding parts of our activity as I said, like a number of our humanities departments and social science departments. Other questions? Yes, please, the lady by the, just by the phone, and then we'll come to you second. Yes.
Hello, my name is Samya Goyal. I'm from the class of 2012. My question is, what are your plans for the expansion that was happening in the Village in New York?
Yeah.
What do you plan to do with that space?
Let me make a comment there. NYU is a remarkable place, and one of the things that is remarkable is what it's been able to do with the space that it has. If you look at academic space per student, NYU has half the footprint that Columbia in the same city has. We have 1/5 of the footprint that Harvard has, and about 1/6 of the footprint that Yale has. So there is incredible concentration and congestion in our academic space. You're referring, I'm sure, to a building that will go ahead and was the subject of a great deal of debate and discussion before I arrived. It will be on Mercer Street. And I view it less, use the word expansion, I view it less of an expansion and more a decompression. It will be space that will allow spectacular new facilities for our performing arts schools, Tisch and Steinhardt. It will provide scores of new classrooms for the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, again, really relieving pressure that exists in so many departments around NYU. It will provide new athletic space. It's being built on the former Coles Gymnasium. Any of you who used the Coles Gymnasium will know that it was not air-conditioned. And I know that one goes to a gym to sweat, but in July and August at Coles, it was a bit too much sweating. And it will be air-conditioned. It will be outstanding state-of-the-art athletic facilities. We will also build more student accommodation, desperately needed. And we will also build something that is also desperately needed in NYU in this city, and that's faculty accommodation. So the building is going ahead. Coles has already closed. It's being decommissioned. Its demolition will start any day. And we will begin over the next months and years the construction of a critically needed new academic space that will provide spectacular instruction and performance space for many, many academic activities around. Okay? Yes, question at the back there.
Hi, I'm Crystal Downcourt, class of 2006, 10 years. Thank you. I was very interested in how you spoke about student diversity at NYU. Can you talk a bit about any initiatives around faculty diversity?
Absolutely.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that's a major priority for us. It's been part of the discussion that has taken place on the task force that I mentioned for diversity, inclusion, and equity. I appointed a new provost. We have a new provost at NYU. She started on September the 1st, Katie Fleming. She's a distinguished historian. Katie has taken faculty diversity in all of its different forms as the single highest priority in her provostship. And of course, that requires really very thoughtful approaches that include education. I will put it as boldly as that. Education of our faculty search committees, education around unconscious bias. There's been a great deal of research in recent years proving that unconscious bias exists. And in the case of gender diversity, unconscious bias exists equally in men and women. It's not a male thing, it's a human thing. And so making sure there's that awareness as we go out and recruit, taking new approaches to casting a very wide net, identifying scholars that might not have normally come through the more common routes. I will say as well that this is a long-term issue, because when you are recruiting new professors of engineering, of economics, of transplantation in the medical school, liver transplantation in the medical school, you are recruiting from a pool who have undergone many, many years of training, whether it's in economics or in chemistry or in liver transplantation. So pipeline is very important, and I'm pleased that NYU is taken the lead in one area. We have what's called a postdoc program for minority students, particularly in the sciences, but beyond as well, that actually is encouraging students to enter the world of academia, helping them in those early stages of their career, so that they will then be competitive in the pools for the professorial appointments to tenure track positions. And so very high priority, a number of different initiatives that we're pursuing, but it will be something you'll be hearing more about in the coming years. Thank you. A question at the front here. I got it.
Yoram Kinberg, Business School 73, before it was known as Stern. I always wondered over the years of why NYU has an endowment which is way below the peer group. Has the endowment be the Harvard or Yale level, probably scholarships and other things could have made the university more affordable. The comment on diversity, I found to my positive amazement that the diversity may not come from minorities here, but I see so many people from all over the world, from Asian. I was in an NYU event, 30 or 40% were definitely non-American, probably Asians. So that's an amazing diversity by itself.
It is a wonderful diversity. I can hear from your accent you weren't born in Queens, and you can hear from mine I wasn't born in Brooklyn. So that is that is part of our diversity, our national and intellectual. But diversity needs to go further, and that's why I said the things I said. I do think this is an important area for NYU, and it's one that we will be pursuing in the coming months. Jared.
Hi. You mentioned that we had a very lack of space at NYU. I graduated at NYU at the Heights in 1948. That's 68 years ago. Probably the oldest graduate here. We didn't have any gender problem because they were all men at that time. But we had a beautiful campus, the Hall of Fame for Great Americans, Gould Memorial Library, and lots of space. We sold it to Bronx Community College in 1973. Instead of going to Abu Dhabi and all these countries around the world, why not go back to the Bronx and reacquire our campus from the city? De Blasio needs money.
It's a very beautiful campus, and it has such a historical resonance for NYU. I think, obviously I can't comment. I'm not entirely sure that the city is considering selling it. So it's. I will say, it won't surprise you, I've read a lot about the history of NYU before taking up this role. It was also very clear to me that the decision that was taken, when you're in positions like mine and the Board of Trustees, you have to take very hard decisions sometimes, and it's clear that there was none harder than the decision that was taken at that time to sell the Heights. Look at NYU now. See, as the questioner earlier on said, the trajectory and the great improvement that's taken place. I think one would have to say, and forgive me, that they made the right decision, because NYU survived, and it wasn't clear that without selling the Heights, that it would survive. You know, that building across there, many of you will know, 1 Fifth Avenue, the best address in New York. You know, that used to belong to NYU. That was sold at the same time, and it was sold for less than a 1-bedroom apartment goes now in that building. And but it had to happen because NYU had to survive. It did survive, and now it has thrived. And you know, the connection to New York, I hope I said through Brooklyn and other presences around the city, you know, New York now is so, all 5 boroughs, so connected to this university. Should we be more substantially in the Bronx? That's a debate and a discussion to have in the coming months and years. I realized I didn't answer your question, sir, that you asked a few moments ago, the fellow immigrant that asked the question about the endowment and why is NYU's endowment so low. And again, you know, I was at Yale and part of a university that had a very large endowment. I was at Oxford, which was 700 years older than Yale, that had an endowment even smaller than NYU's. It comes through long history. It comes through, you know, really a commitment on everyone's part, academics, academic leaders, and alumni, to give and to help grow the endowment through very careful management, which you know at places like Harvard and Yale has been an important part of the endowment growth. But I'm committed. As Deborah Lamort, our wonderful head of development here, we are committed to growing the endowment. It may take us a while to get up to Yale and Harvard's level, but if you don't start somewhere, you'll never get there. Last question, I think, because I'm looking at... That was the last one. Let me again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for listening. Thank you for all you do for NYU.